November 1914, Flanders, Belgium. The world is turned into a landscape of wet ash. The earth here has dissolved. It's no longer soil, but a gray, viscous soup that swallows horses, artillery wheels, and the dignity of men. This is the Ypres salient, a place where the air is a thick cocktail of cordite, rotting beetroots, and the copper tang of fresh blood. Amongst the chaos, two figures stand out against the monochrome misery. Elsie Knocker, a woman with the steady hands of a mechanic and the eyes of a hawk, and Mairi Chisholm, barely 18, possessing a quiet, stubborn courage that the generals have yet to name. They have come to the front not for glory, but because the system is failing. The Great War is only months old, but the British medical manual is already obsolete. The doctrine is rigid. When a man falls, he must be moved. You pick him up from the filth of the trench, you load him onto a stretcher, and you slide him into the back of a motor ambulance. From there, it is a 5-mile journey over the long road, a stretch of cratered, frozen mud leading to the base hospitals in the rear. But there is a fatal flaw in the mechanics of mercy. The motor ambulance, the pride of the 1914 Logistics Corps, is a weapon of unintended destruction. As the vehicle lurches and heaves over the broken Belgian roads, the wounded man's body undergoes a silent, physical betrayal. Here is the black box of the journey. When a soldier is hit, his body enters a state of traumatic shock. His blood pressure collapses. His heart, a frantic engine running out of fuel, struggles to keep oxygen moving to his brain. In this state, the body demands one thing: stillness. But the system gives him vibration. The ambulance acts like a centrifuge. Every jolt of the suspension, every bone-shaking rut in the road sends a wave of kinetic energy through his shattered limbs. It isn't the bullet that kills him now. It is the physics of the transport. The motion effectively shakes the life out of his veins. Elsie stands at the tailgate of an arriving Crossley ambulance. The engine idles with a rhythmic, metallic cough. When the doors swing open, there is no sound from within. She looks at the driver, whose face is masked by a crust of dried mud. "He was talking when we loaded him," the driver says, his voice flat, exhausted. "He was asking for a cigarette near the 3-mile marker. Then he just stopped." Elsie climbs inside. She doesn't need a stethoscope to know the truth. The man on the stretcher is warm, but he is gone. His heart simply gave up under the stress of the journey. "He died of the distance," she whispers. Behind her, the establishment is already moving to the next task. A medical officer, Colonel Harrison, walks past with a clipboard, his uniform remarkably clean despite the surrounding squalor. He is a man who believes in the sanctity of the ledger. "Colonel," Elsie calls out, stepping into his path, "this is the 3rd man this morning. They are dying because we are moving them too far, too fast. Their bodies cannot sustain the vibration of the ambulances." Harrison stops. He doesn't look at Elsie. He looks at the clipboard, as if the paper holds more reality than the corpse behind her. "The regulations are clear, Mrs. Knocker," he says, his voice a dry rasp of crystallized arrogance. "A battlefield is a zone of transition. We cannot provide surgical care under fire. It is inefficient. The wounded must be evacuated to the rear where the facilities are proper. If they die in transit, it is a regrettable consequence of the severity of their wounds. not the method of their transport. It's the method that is killing them, Elsie insists. Give us a cellar. Give us a room near the line. If we can keep them warm, if we can stop the shock before we move them, they will live. Harrison offers a thin, patronizing smile, the kind of smile reserved for those who don't understand the realities of war. A cellar? You suggest we set up a hospital in the middle of a German artillery range? This is a professional military operation, not a parish tea party. You are here to provide transport, not to rewrite the king's regulations. Stay in your lane, Mrs. Knocker. The system knows what it is doing. He walks away, the heels of his boots clicking against a rare patch of solid stone. While the system retreats into its manuals and its pride, the ghosts are already working. In the fading light of the afternoon, while the generals discuss the next day's bombardment over glasses of sherry, Mary Chisholm is in the dark. She is not reading a manual. She is holding the hand of a dying boy, feeling the heat leave his skin and recording the exact moment his pulse flickers out. She and Elsie are no longer listening to the colonel. They are listening to the silence of the dead. They realize that if they follow the rules, they are merely presiding over a conveyor belt of ghosts. The realization is a cold, sharp blade. To save these men, they must become outlaws. They must disappear from the sight of the medical establishment and embed themselves in the one place the system has abandoned, the very edge of the abyss. They begin to pack, not just bandages and morphine, but a spirit of defiance that the British Army isn't prepared to handle. They are heading toward Pervyse, a ghost town so close to the German lines that the shells don't whistle. They scream. It is a suicidal gamble. The colonel believes they will be dead within the week. He treats their departure as a minor clerical error that will eventually correct itself when their names are added to the casualty lists. He has fatally underestimated the women, and he has ignored the reality of the mud. But the hammer is about to fall. While the brass toasted to their own efficiency in the safety of the rear, a storm was gathering over the trenches, and the only thing standing between thousands of men and a muddy grave was a pair of women with a stove, some chocolate, and a total disregard for the orders of small-minded men. Chori, 1915. The village of Pervyse no longer exists on any map used by the living. It is a skeleton of brick and charred timber, a jagged silhouette against the bruised purple of the Flemish sky. It sits in the death zone, a strip of land so ravaged by German artillery that even the rats have begun to retreat. The trenches are just 100 meters away. You can hear the rhythmic clack-clack of German bolts being thrown, the cough of a sentry, the wet slap of a spade against the earth. This is where Elsie and Mary have set up their kingdom. They have occupied a shattered cellar beneath a farmhouse that has been leveled by high explosives. The ceiling is reinforced with stolen railway sleepers and sandbags. Water drips from the mortar, a slow, hypnotic ticking that counts down the seconds between shell bursts. The air is thick with the scent of paraffin, damp wool, and something unexpected, the rich, velvety aroma of Dutch cocoa. The medical establishment in London is horrified. To them, this isn't a medical post. It's a suicide pact. The manual states that a regimental aid post should be a safe distance from the line to ensure the orderly processing of the wounded. But Elsie and Mairi have realized that orderly processing is just a polite term for a funeral march. They have pioneered a radical, rogue doctrine, the rule of stillness. The mechanic of their success is almost insultingly simple. Here's the reality of the human engine. When a body is torn by shrapnel, it doesn't just bleed. It enters a state of catastrophic hydraulic failure. We call it shock. The heart, sensing a drop in pressure, pulls blood away from the extremities to protect the brain. The skin turns to ice. The blood thickens like sludge. If you lift that man, if you jostle him, if you subject him to the vibration of a motor car, you break the fragile equilibrium holding his soul in his body. You are effectively unplugging a machine that is already short-circuiting. Elsie's solution: you don't move him. You bring the hospital to the hole in the ground where he fell. The cellar is a wandering kitchen. When a soldier is pulled from the mud, he isn't thrown into an ambulance. He is carried down the stone steps into the warmth. Mairi works in the dim light of a single lantern. She doesn't reach for a scalpel first. She reaches for a blanket, then another, then a stone bottle filled with boiling water. She places it against the man's femoral artery. She is trying to restart the internal furnace. "Stay with me, lad," she whispers. Her voice is the only soft thing in a world made of iron. She holds a cup of steaming hot chocolate to his blue lips. The sugar provides an immediate chemical spark to the blood. The heat radiates through the chest cavity. It is a low-tech defiance of a high-tech war. By the time the man is finally moved hours, sometimes days later, his engine has been stabilized. He is no longer a flickering candle. He is a steady flame. But the system cannot abide a success it didn't authorize. In late February, a representative of the medical directorate, a major general with a chest full of medals and a mind like a locked box, arrives at the cellar. He has to crawl through a muddy communication trench to get there, an indignity that clearly fuels his resentment. He stands in the doorway, his polished boots a shimmering insult to the filth of the room. He looks at the stove. He looks at the tins of cocoa. He looks at Elsie, who is currently stitching a scalp wound with the calm precision of a tailor. "This is highly irregular, Mrs. Knocker," the general barks. His voice echoes off the damp stone like a pistol shot. "This cellar is a tactical liability. You have no sterilization equipment, no proper triage theater, and you are you serving confectionery to the troops?" Elsie doesn't look up from her needle. "I am serving them a reason to keep their hearts beating, General." "It is a violation of the evacuation chain," he counters, his face reddening. "The men should be at the base hospital in Dunkirk. You are hoarding the wounded. You are creating a bottleneck. The manual dictates that speed of transport is the priority." "The manual is killing them," Elsie says, finally meeting his gaze. "The speed of transport is the speed of their pulse dropping to 0. We've had 80 men through this cellar this week. 78 are still breathing. Can your base hospital say the same for the men who arrive in the back of your high-speed ambulances?" The general bristles. To him, the statistics are less important than the visual order of the war. He sees a kitchen. Elsie sees a fortress of survival. He sees 2 women out of place. The men in the trenches see the Madonnas of Pervyse. "I shall be filing a report," the general says, turning on his heel. "This establishment cannot be allowed to continue. It is a mockery of military discipline. You believe you can fight a war with hot chocolate and blankets. It is absurd. The ocean of this conflict will swallow you both. He retreats into the safety of his spreadsheets and his clean uniforms, believing he has delivered a final judgment. He treats the women as a minor administrative nuisance, a glitch in the grand machinery of the British Empire. But he has fatally underestimated the ghost in the machine. While the general sat in his headquarters, safe behind miles of wire, the hammer of reality was preparing its strike. The spring of 1915 brought a new horror to the Ypres salient, a weapon that bypassed the skin and attacked the very air. The system had no plan for it. The manuals had no chapter on it. But in the dark of a cellar in Pervyse, two women were already learning the one thing the system had forgotten: that in the face of absolute destruction, the only thing that matters isn't the rank on your shoulder. It's the person holding the light. The general believed the Madonnas would be swept away by the first real storm. He didn't realize that they were the only ones who knew how to anchor the soul against the wind. And as the first yellow clouds of chlorine gas began to drift across the no man's land, the laughter of the brass was about to turn into a desperate, choking silence. Tamakers, 1918. The air has changed. It is no longer just the smell of wet earth and old iron. There is a sweetness to it now, a cloying chemical scent like rotting pineapples. In the distance, the horizon isn't just flickering, it is screaming. The German spring offensive, the Kaiserschlacht, has begun. For 3 years, Elsie and Mairi have lived in the mouth of the beast. They have survived thousands of shellings, several direct hits, and the constant, grinding pressure of being the only two women allowed to remain in the Belgian front lines. But the system, which once tried to evict them with paperwork, is now being dismantled by 1,000,000 tons of high explosives. Suddenly, the world goes silent. Not the silence of peace, but the heavy, suffocating silence of the yellow cloud. Here is the mechanics of the end. Chlorine gas is heavier than air. It doesn't dissipate. It sinks. It flows like a ghostly river, seeking out the low places, the trenches, the craters, and the cellars. When it enters a human lung, it reacts with moisture to form hydrochloric acid. It doesn't just choke you, it dissolves the very tissue that allows you to breathe. The body's engine doesn't just stall, it melts. The cellar in Pervyse, their sanctuary for 1,000 nights, has become a trap. The gas rolls down the stone steps like a thick, mustard-colored fog. There's no time for hot chocolate. There is only the frantic reach for masks, the stinging of the eyes, and the terrifying realization that the rule of stillness is now their greatest enemy. To stay still is to drown in the air. Elsie and Mairi are caught in the very catastrophe they spent years preventing. They are loaded into the back of an ambulance, the same rattling, violent machines they once called death traps. For the first time, they are not the ones holding the hands of the dying. They are the ones whose pulses are flickering. The vibration they once warned against now tears at their own damaged lungs. Every jolt of the wheel is a needle in their chests. They survive. But the war is finished with them. When the fog of the Great War finally lifted, the world was eager to build monuments of stone and bronze. They gave Elsie and Mairi medals. They called them the Madonnas of Pervyse. Their photos appeared in the papers, two brave women who did their bit for king and country. But that was only the surface. The bitter victory began the moment the guns fell silent. As the medical establishment gathered in their wood-paneled boardrooms to write the official histories of the war, a subtle, systematic erasure began. The revolutionary doctrine Elsie and Mairi had proven in the blood and mud of Flanders, the idea that trauma care must be immediate, decentralized, and focused on warmth and shock prevention, was quietly discarded. The experts, men who had spent the war in clean offices miles from the gas, looked at the reports from Pervyse and scoffed. They dismissed their success as feminine intuition or wartime eccentricity. They argued that proper medicine required the very hierarchies and evacuation chains that Elsie had proven were lethal. The system didn't just ignore their solution, it stole the credit and then buried the truth. For decades, the medical manuals went back to the old ways. Thousands of lives were lost in subsequent conflicts because the establishment refused to admit that two unqualified women with a kitchen stove had solved a problem the generals couldn't. Elsie Knocker and Mary Chisholm returned to a world that wanted them to be ladies again. They were no longer the queens of a cellar. They were relics of a tragedy everyone wanted to forget. They died decades later, their revolutionary insights into human survival, gathering dust in archives that no one bothered to read until the modern era rediscovered the importance of point-of-injury care. They saved thousands, but the system never forgave them for being right. We look back at 1914 and see the hubris of the generals, the arrogance of the men who thought the war would be over by Christmas. We see a world that prioritized the manual over the human. But do we see the same hubris in our society today? We still live in a world of experts who dismiss the warnings of the outsiders. We still have systems that prioritize efficiency and procedure over the visceral reality of the human spirit. We still wait for the official solution while the people in the mud are already holding the answer in their hands. The story of the Madonnas of Pervyse isn't just a story about a war. It's a mirror. It asks us, who are we ignoring today because they don't have the right rank? Whose hot chocolate and blankets are we mocking while we wait for a high-tech miracle that will arrive too late? History isn't just a record of what happened. It's a warning of what we keep doing to ourselves. The voices of Elsie and Mary are still there, if you listen closely, whispering from the low places, reminding us that sometimes the only way to save a life is to have the courage to break the rules. If you believe that stories like Elsie and Mary's deserve to be remembered, please join our ranks by subscribing. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.